So we're just waiting on the moderator, it looks like. But in the meantime, Anurag and I, let's talk about some other stuff. So you're the co-founder of Polygon. You founded Avail after. So tell me about your story in ZK.
Yeah, funny that you ask me, right? Like, I mean, to be honest, maybe a lot of people don't know about this, right? Like, we started actually Polygon or Matic at the time with doing this construction called Plasma. This was before rollups came into the play. And we tried implementing Plasma. That never happened. And then we actually finally ended building POS. But at the time, rollups became popular or were beginning to emerge. But when we finished with POS, like we thought Arbitrum and Optimism at the time had at least a year's worth of lead, before us. So we thought we couldn't do optimistic rollups. We need to do ZK rollups. And to be very honest, the three of us, me, JD, Sandeep, we didn't have any ZK competency at the time. We actually spent 3 months trying to learn ZK from first principles. We failed.
I love that.
And then we kind of, went on this acquisition spree, talked to all the teams in the space. Finally, ended up, having Hermes, Mir Protocol, Maiden, Bobbin, all of them join us, and that's how we kind of went into ZK. But of course, that journey helped us a lot, and we use a lot of ZK in Avail, like, for example, with ZK validity proofs and such. Yeah.
I love that. And so welcome. Just for some context.
Okay.
I'm not the moderator, but I started with a simple question of how you got into ZK.
Okay.
So how about you answer? I'll end, and we'll pass back to you for moderator.
Okay, great. So I think I started ZK because I played Dark Forest at the first time. And I think Dark Forest is kind of like the funniest ZK tech demo. And we figured out we got to build the most bullish ZK demo on ourselves. So we built ZK Yesina, kind of like your take. And actually, I started my role in Zerobase after Tornado Cash is officially innocent. Because this is why I've been like playing around in the gaming sector beforehand, is because I think if we are not going to get fucked by SEC, the best way to do it is build something on a gaming token, so we have a simulation and also a sandbox to play around with. And now everything is innocent. ZK is now freedom, so Zerobase and real money.
I love that. So it feels like two very different stories. So I'll keep mine short. I got into ZK the wrong way. I started my career working in TradFi for a very large insurance company, and we were working on decentralized insurance and reinsurance products. And one of the problems we were trying to solve, or I was trying to solve, was how could we build an on-chain reinsurance product that could reinsure policies that were issued off-chain, wherein you could have underwriting of decedent data, or you could have disclosure of decedent data into a public-facing liquidity pool used to underwrite a risk parameter for a group of policies. And the only way to do that was, that I could think of, was ZK. It was a privacy-first use case in TradFi. Anyway, we never launched it, but that got me into ZK.
Great. So yeah, I think I'm the moderator here. So
you are.
I'm gonna shoot the first spicy take, because this is by design. I'm not a ZK hater, but risk zero. Lisa asked me to throw some heat in the space. So I see a lot of familiar faces here in our lovely audience. But let me ask this question. Why the heck people on the other side of the stage should care about us, like everybody here?
So I think the biggest mistake that ZK companies make is trying to sell ZK as a product. ZK is not a product, it's a technology. What ZK offers is safety, security, and privacy. Those are what a company has to lead with. If you value safety, if you value privacy, then you value ZK.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. Like, I mean, I think a lot. I mean, it's not only ZK; it's a lot of other people, including me, in the industry who try to sell the technology itself. I mean, it's really the end usage, right? Like, and what can you use it for? What can it make easy for a regular person to use? You know, like, can we, like, for example, like, stable coins are a real use case for crypto in the sense that people in Turkey, Venezuela, you know, like a lot of other places use it. Like, how does ZK come into the picture? Can we kind of, let's say, share my banking data with a bank for getting a mortgage, for example? You know, like without having to share my raw data, for example, right? Like, I mean, there's a, you know, one of my friends works on a company called Silence, which uses MPC to kind of enable privacy-based data sharing between a bank and a telecom provider to catch telecom fraud. I mean, I'm just kind of, so there's this a lot of use cases that we have to apply it to, for example. And in general, the idea is that if you kind of, again, yesterday I was talking to one of my other friends about like huge amount of computes required for ZK, but huge amounts of compute are also required for LLMs. But you have LLMs being used crazily because LLMs were able to kind of stick that to an use case that makes sense to a regular person, right? Like, and so I think that's the entire cycle. Yeah.
Okay, so I kind of need to call out this because I gotta ask you guys to identify your business model. Is it B2B or B2C or B2B2C? And if, like, as we said, you are not going to sell the ZK tech, then what actually are you selling? Or say, what kind of user experience are you providing? What kind of problems are you trying to solve?
See, I think I've thought about this for a long time. I've made all the mistakes that I've made as well, thinking about B2B, B2C, and depending upon who you ask, there will be different answers. A pre-token founder will have a different answer. A post-token founder will have a different answer. You know, like in general. But if you kind of look at what are the dominant distribution plays in the space today, for example, right? Like if you look at distribution, it is like the exchanges, the Binances, OKXs, for example, maybe the wallets, the stablecoin guys, a few other players, right? Like, I mean, if you look at the dominant distribution plays, right? Like, I mean, now you have to think it from that angle, right? Like, are you able to, with your technology, with your infrastructure, are you able to build some sort of distribution, whether it is retail distribution or whether it is, you know, like B2B distribution, doesn't matter, right? Like distribution is key. Are you able to build distribution is really the thing, right? Like, I mean, it doesn't make sense to distinguish between, you know, like should ZK be infrastructure or, you know, like something like that. Like, I mean, I think we discussed off-chain, right? Like, I mean, Microsoft as an equity company doesn't have to pose as retail, right? Like, but it has distribution. It has tremendous enterprise distribution. It has tremendous retail distribution. And so everything is about distribution.
Yeah, so to start with, you know, functionally, I don't sell ZK. I sell privacy and I sell security of computation. And so the question is, who wants to buy privacy and security of computation? Maybe a very sophisticated consumer, but generally not, generally another business. And that business's final customer might be another business, hopefully not, or it might be a consumer. And in that case, I'd be B2B2C. But generally, the touch points that a ZK company will have will be with another company that offers a product elsewhere that has some imperative on security or privacy and wants to therefore adopt what is the end game technology of security and privacy, zero knowledge. But one thing I'll also add, a lot of the pressure that companies feel in crypto to be B2C or B2B2C is because of retail contribution to tokens and things like that. But that's not a question of consumers as much as it's a question of investor relations. And that is an entirely separate problem and set of considerations. Functionally, a zero-knowledge business should optimize for one thing, and that is gross margin. Does it sell proofs that people want to pay for? If so, that business is operating successfully.
Nice, nice. Okay, so moving on next. So let's say, okay, what actually is the first product market fit, or say use cases that might have gross margin, and what's going to be the biggest in the next future, or say near future?
Yeah, there's one that's right down the pipe, and that is ZK rollups. Scalability of blockchains is a big market. Base did 100 million in revenue, right? There are ZK rollups that when you look at the cost that the amount that users pay in fees for the sequencer minus DA costs, verification costs, proof generation costs are profitable. And so there exists a margin there that proving has. Great. That's like the main market on ZK today. Where ZK is going to go is really just places where there's an imperative on security over computation. And where is there an imperative on security of computation? Places where there's an economic value assigned to the result of that. Obviously, everything in blockchains have an economic value assigned to the result of block production or most computation on chain. But there are other places. AI is one of those fundamental areas.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of expand on his point regarding, like ZK rollups in general. Like, we don't realize sometimes that blockchains like Solana and other L1 blockchains really spend a ton of money on, like securing their blockchain, like by way of inflation. And the main difference between like a rollup, especially a ZK rollup, is that it replaces the L1 model with this very, like sequencer-based model, which really brings down the cost of this verifiable compute rapidly. And that is where, in any case, ZK has gotten product market fit, because, as we discussed again, it's the blockchain part, preventing the reacquisition part, that has brought about a ton of investment into ZKs. And like fast forward the investment, like, I mean, like Polygon itself put around a few hundred millions into kind of like incentivizing some of this, and a lot of other teams like brought into this. And it's of course the first use case blockchains, but it's going to be used for predominantly a lot of things. But even today, the use case for replacing an L1 with a ZK L2 is very under discussed.
Yeah. So what do you think will be the next PMF, or say the biggest use case? Because I think for Lagrange or Ismael is AI. So what about you? Because during my experience building ZKPs, I feel like we are using the blockchain as a database. Are we building too much chains?
See, blockchains are primarily, like what if you kind of think of the heart of it, blockchains are really a disintermediation mechanism, right? It is this ledger. See, it's a ledger. It's a ledger, right? But it's a ledger where a lot of different parties can write into the ledger based on programmatic conditions and stuff like that, right? Like, and ledgers didn't used to be like this, right? Like, I mean, company ledgers, banking ledgers, regulator ledgers, shipping company ledgers, whatever, right? Like they aren't like that. They are owned by an entity. They have exclusive right access, and so on. So blockchains are really like this whole coordination mechanism, right? Like you can have each company tap into or plug into the blockchain and can then allow like two parties to talk each other who might have not talked to each other, and that can unlock a lot of stuff, right? Like, anyways, not getting into too deep into that rabbit hole. One thing I'm very bullish on is primarily on the data tokenization point. In general, what I mean by data tokenization is in general, there's a bunch of, when we talk about tokenization, we generally talk about financial asset tokenization. What I mean is, if we are able to, in a privacy preserving way, tokenize a lot of data that we, like generate throughout the day, like whether this be social data, like Netflix data, e-commerce data, for example, and package that into, what I call like a privacy preserving data vault, you are able to kind of have this sophisticated querying done, which is basically, like me not having to just share my entire raw data. I can share very targeted data. Like,
I see.
Like that sort of a thing.
Okay. Ismael?
Sorry, the question again?
the question is, what's like the use case for the near future for AI, for instance?
The near use case. I mean, so
for AI, like what actually is going to be the private part? What actually is the privacy and also security ZK is trying to?
I mean, there's a bunch. Like privacy-preserving inference is a big area, right? How can I ensure that I can use a public diagnostic model for some medical purpose that I don't know where it's run or who's running it? You know, how can I ensure that some mechanism I'm using to issue an asset or write a fraud score against a user is publicly verifiable? It's an open model that, you know, the results are provable. I think there's a lot of like very obvious use cases. Everything in Deep AI needs ZK. And so, yeah, there's a ton of use cases there. I think one I'm very excited about is deepfakes. Provable detection of deepfakes, I think, is a very big one. Provable detection of violent or illicit content. Tagging images within their metadata or in public repositories with proofs of commitments to those images not containing or containing, you know, harmful content. I think all of that stuff is fascinating use cases of ZK within crypto that actually reaches out beyond crypto.
Okay, I got you. So now let's add more spice to this space.
Let's do it.
Just
Who's most overhyped?
Time, please, because we are running out of time. So if you could wrap up in the next
Okay,
couple minutes.
may I do this last one? So who's the most overhyped ZK project?
Lagrange.
Ooh!
Okay.
Avail. All right, I'll come out with my real take. Every ZK rollup. There are too many ZK rollups. We don't need this many, right? We need demand for block space. We need demand for rollups, and we need value to accrue back to Ethereum. We do not need this many ZK rollups. We do not need every team building a ZK VM to now launch its own ZK rollup stack. Like that is cooked. We're done. We don't need that. Like, come up with another use case, something for ZK that's not a rollup, and go and sell it.
Nice.
Just been told that it's okay to have a couple more questions, so please go ahead.
Okay. Okay.
Well, they're going to run off stage after that one.
All right. So, please, what's the overhype? Not Lagrange.
I think in general, some of the privacy-based, I think Aztec is doing fine, but some of the others, you know, like I don't know what they're doing. I mean, it's high time a lot of these projects start to ship. You know, like get into production. For example, I know, you know, like some of these things take time, but a lot of the privacy ZK projects that I see haven't made it into production, you know, like soon, I think.
I see. Okay. So my takes should be on ZKVM because I have this kind of analogy is that you build on Python or TypeScript first. It's kind of like a ZKVM because it's easy and also easy to compile. But after that, if you figure out, okay, so I'm lacking in performance, you change to Rust. So this is the exact time you change to like DSLs or something. So next up question, of course.
Yeah, just one point there. I don't actually generally, like I don't actually agree on that, to be honest. Like I understand if you want to do like low-level optimizations, you have to go, you know, like low level. But I think there's a lot of value to having developers write programs in higher level languages, and you know, like having this supported by ZK VMs. It just brings a ton of devs into the fold, really. Like in our experience, you know, like we were writing this consensus verifier with, you know, like succinct essentially, and when we started doing that, the only way to do it in a performant way was using, you know, like going down to the level of Plonky 2, which is very laboring, very tiring, full of you know, too many bugs. For example, it took a long time, but it did it. Then we rewrote it in succinct SP1 within a few weeks, for example. Okay. So I understand where you're coming from in terms of low-level optimization, but it's not accessible to a lot of people. And so you deliberately shut it down. It's like basically, you know, like you're saying, you know, program in assembly language, don't do Python, for example.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, so of course the follow-up question will be, who is actually the ZK product that's doing great and people doesn't care about enough. Not your project, of course.
I mean, Lagrange. I'm sorry, but everyone already cares about Lagrange, so can't answer that. But what I'll say is a category that I hear talked about on crypto Twitter, I hear talked about at the main event, but I never hear talked about at ZK Days, and that is ZK TLS. There is real demand for people building real apps with ZK TLS, even if it doesn't actually use ZK. But hey, it has the word ZK in it, and people find it exciting, and you can build some cool stuff, right? You can build, a great example is Earnify. They're doing earned wage access. EarnOS is another one. They're working with Dig and some other people. There's like some real interesting things people are building with ZK TLS that are like net new apps on chain. That stuff's awesome.
I think basically Maiden is a very underrated project. Like it's from the Polygon fold, but like very few people talk about it. But it's actually very cool. Like if you actually get into the weeds, it's built out from first principles on client side proving. There's a bunch of stuff that you can run on, even on the browser once we get to it, for example. And I think from a more mainstream perspective, like I think. There's a bunch of stuff that you could repurpose Maiden to in real consumer use cases, for example, like even very simple things like password authentication, for example, and so on. So I think I'm just waiting for Maiden to get fully built, but it's very underrated.
Okay, so in my case, I think TE is actually underrated. I think ZK plus TE can do a lot of stuff, and ZK plus TE plus ZK TLS plus Coastnerks can really do a lot of stuff.
It can raise at a high multiple.
True. So what I really believe is that we have already built a casino on Mars. It's the time for Martians to bring by the Martian technology back on Earth to unlock more ZK use cases, to jailbreak the Web 2 to Web 3. I think, are we running out of time? Oh, okay. So no more questions. Please give one sentence heat take, and that's it. On whatever stuff, like on whatever ZK projects, one sentence heat take, unpopular take, and I call it.
People in ZK are way too concerned about what they're building, and they're not concerned enough about who's using it.
Own the distribution, own the front end. Like it's very important, not just to be building very cool ZK tech. Like if you don't get distribution, someone else higher up will, like cut you out.
I think we built too much vaporware and haven't focused enough on consumer ZK.